Hi, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining Ongoing Operations webinar series, Lattes and Learning. I'm Amy McCoey. I'm the Marketing Manager at Ongoing Operations, and today we'll be discussing how to determine which Office 365 package is right for your credit union. We have Hugh Smallwood, who's the Chief Technology Officer at Ongoing Operations, who will be joining us. Shane Butcher, our Senior Solutions and Security Architect and Virtual CISO, and Brandon Friedman, our Senior vCIO, who will be chatting with us today. As we go through the webinar, please feel free to type in any questions that you have, and I'll serve as a moderator and feed those into our presenters. Don't feel like you have to reserve them to the end, but we'll also, of course, reserve time at the end for open Q&A. A recording of this webinar will also be available and emailed out to you at the conclusion of the webinar in case you want to share it with teammates or replay any sections you may have missed or have questions on. And I've also gone ahead and attached a copy of the slides we're presenting in the handout section on your screen. So in case you want to reference any of those slides, that's where those are living. And with that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Brandon, who's going to kick us off for this installment of Lattes and Learning. So grab your coffee and Brandon, take us away.
All right, great. Thanks, Amy. And thanks everybody for joining. Okay, so like Amy said, we're going to be talking today about which Microsoft Office 365 licensing is right for your credit union. I've probably had similar discussions with many of you who are on here already. If not, we'd love to chat and discuss this sometime in the future. Okay, let's hop to the next slide. All right, so a quick introduction here with regards to Office 365 and kind of why we decided this would be a great topic for this this webinar. Office 365 licensing is confusing, for one. There's many different SKUs available, and they come with all different features and functions. Not to mention, they also have different options based on the size of your organization. So this can become really an onerous task to choose the right licensing without overspending or overbuying functionality that you may or may not need. And we do have a quick poll right after this. So a couple questions, a few questions here that we'd love to get some answers on and kind of know where you guys as credit union clients or prospective clients, or just people, you know, if you're just interested in learning a little bit about Office 365, where you stand currently with regards to using Office 365.
So we'll give everyone just a few more seconds here to vote. It looks like we have about 58 or 60% of folks who voted. So we'll give it just a few more seconds and we'll go ahead and share those results. All right, here you go, Brandon. Here are our results.
So is the bottom one 0%, Amy, because everybody said no?
It's just zero. Yeah, it's 0%. So 70% of folks are saying they're currently using Office 365 and 30% have migrated their mail to Exchange Online.
Okay. All right, great. So thank you for responding, and let's go to the next slide here. Okay, so what are the basics my credit union needs, right? There are basic tools that every credit union should have to meet the strict expectations, best practices made by regulators. And the question then becomes, how do I achieve these basic requirements through Office 365 licensing? And what if my credit union wants to go beyond the basic table stakes? So these are really kind of the main things that we know that most of our credit union clients are looking for, either because the NCUA is saying you really need to have these types of solutions, or and in some cases the credit unions want to go a little bit beyond that and add some additional security or protection to their environment. And then the question really becomes, so okay, I know I want these things, but how do I actually get them, and how do I achieve them through the licensing options that are out there from Microsoft? So let's hop to the next slide, please. Okay, and as you can see, there are a lot of different types of licensing out there, whether you want Office 365 or Microsoft 365. Do you want to add Project, vCIO? Do they come with any licenses? How about Intune? Teams is obviously one of the big topics of conversation out there currently. A lot of people are interested in deciding if Teams is the right solution for their credit union, either to communicate only internally or externally. So it's confusing. There's a lot of stuff out there. Hopefully, we can help you make some of those decisions, and maybe through this webinar, you'll get a little bit more information on that, and give you some guidance towards kind of choosing the right licenses that make sense for your credit union. Okay, thank you, Amy. All right, so here's some of the questions credit unions should be asking themselves before choosing their licensing with Microsoft, and this will help you figure out the best licensing options based on what your credit union needs. So how many users do you have? Some licenses, they give you more features built into the license if you're a smaller organization. So you may not need enterprise level licensing in order to get the feature sets that you want. So I'm gonna read through these. I hate reading off slides, but I think these questions are really relevant and good questions you should be asking yourself as a credit union when you're choosing your Office 365 licensing. So do all users require the same licensing, or will they need different features? In some cases, you may want to have a mix and match of licenses throughout your organization, and certain users are going to use one license while other users use a different license. How will your staff access O365 services? Are you only letting your staff access O365 when they're at the credit union, or do you want them to be able to access it from home? Or maybe only from certain devices that are that the credit union has allowed the users to access it from. So that kind of goes to where can your staff access O365 from, kind of bleeds over. What are your security requirements? So do you require users to use MFA? Do you require your users to use MFA when they're at the credit union working, or only when they're outside of the organization? Do you plan to integrate voice into your Teams platform and make external calls or set up conference meetings? Do you want to upgrade to Windows 10 Enterprise? And with some licenses, you can actually get the upgrade from Windows 10 Home, or I'm sorry, Windows 10 Pro to Windows 10 Enterprise. So there are some opportunities where you can use that feature to make sure that all of your users' endpoints are on the same Windows 10 Enterprise. And then how will I manage my licensing? What are my commitments? So depending on how you sign up for Office 365, you may be able to do short-term commitments, which means you have a lot of flexibility in changing licensing on the fly as your organization evolves. Or maybe if you buy directly from Microsoft, in most cases, you're going to have to make 12-month commitments or even pay more to get that flexibility. So there's really a lot to think about when it comes to which licenses you want to choose, and these are some really good questions that your organization should be thinking about.
Then I think we're at a poll now, right? Yep.
Yeah, sorry.
Thanks, Amy.
Yeah.
Thanks, Amy.
Yeah, so we've got a poll up here. If you guys want to put in your votes, please. And basically, we're going to be talking a little bit about security. So have you laid out your security requirements for your organization? And Shane is our resident security expert on Office 365. All right, so we have most people voting here. So I'm going to go ahead and close it and share our results.
All right, great. And I think we have a couple of follow-ups, Amy?
Yeah, so that's great. So about 73% said that they have laid it out. And then our next question we've got here for the group is, do you feel confident choosing the right licensing for your organization? I know Brandon just went through a bit why why it can be confusing, why there are so many different options and variables to consider. So we'll go ahead and give a few more seconds here for people to vote.
Yeah, and I know personally that I've read quite a bit of information out there from Microsoft on licensing, and it can be very confusing. Not to mention that Microsoft likes to change their licensing on a regular basis. So as soon as you do feel confident, they may change that up on you. So if any of you have experienced that, I understand what you're going through.
We'll go ahead and close this and share. And I think pretty similar to what we were expecting, about 60% of the group said no and 40% said yes. And that is one of the reasons we thought this would be a great topic and somewhere where we can dig in on some questions. And we have our last question here for the group in this polling section so we can gather some information. And that is, do you feel confident in your credit union's ability to properly configure your Office 365 licensing tools to meet your requirements? So kind of combining all of those together.
Yeah, what we're talking about here is you may, you may be very confident that you're choosing the right licensing, but then once you have the licensing, being able to actually make it do what you want it to do, and that's really what we're talking about here.
Yeah, and just to supplement that, so a lot of features come turned on by default, right? But some of these advanced features require subsequent configuration or locking down in order to really take full advantage of them. So that's kind of where we're going here.
All right, and with that, we had an overwhelming no and majority of folks, and a few folks with yes. So with that, we can item and you guys and Brandon and Shane, I'll give it to you guys to continue. And of course, if anyone has questions or specifics as we're going through, please feel free to type those in the question section.
Sure. Thanks, Amy. And so, we wanted to kind of go over some of the more common products that we're seeing used by credit unions, requested by credit unions. And as we've done research, are the ones that you're probably going to want to meet both your business and security requirements, right? So the first one on the list there is one that Microsoft has recently created / updated to make it a really valuable option for smaller credit unions. So the downside of this one is it's you can have a maximum of 300 users or employees using this license, and it caps the mailbox at 50 gigabytes, unlike the enterprise options below. But what they've really done is taken this license and put a lot of the enterprise features in it, put in the mobility and the Azure Active Directory that we see down below to give small to mid-size businesses and credit unions a really price positive secure solution for Office 365. So we're seeing a lot of folks go with that. The Office 365 E3 and E5 are enterprise options, and they are for folks that have more than 300 users, or that the requirement really is to have larger mailboxes. We get into unlimited archiving and some of the additional compliance features for those. And once we get into the Microsoft 365, that starts adding in the Windows Enterprise licensing so that we can take our machines from Windows 10 Pro, which is what most of them come with if we buy with an OEM license, and we take it up to an enterprise so we can control at a greater level. One of the nice things about the Business Premium is it actually gives us a subset of that functionality as well with Intune and the ability to control Windows 10, not to the same level as the enterprise, but we're able to take some more actions remotely on those machines and lock them down. And when we look at the security add-ons, as we look at the Azure Active Directory P1 and P2, those the primary security benefits that we're looking at, what we see really helpful to credit unions is the conditional access, so that we can control where we can access this from, what conditions are we going to allow it from any machine. Are we going to allow it from one that's only joined to our domain? Does it have to have an Intune client or the company portal client? All sorts of things. And when we get into the P2, we're able to get into a risk-based decision tree. So do we normally see this user signing in from this location, or are they now trying to access it from overseas, where it might be someone with compromised credentials? And we can make risk-based decisions on whether we allow them access for those sorts of items, as well as forcing MFA based on conditions. When we get into the Office 365 Advanced Threat Protection, and that one can be confusing because there's also two other advanced threat protection products that are entirely different than this one. This is adding on our anti-spoofing, our advanced anti-phishing. We get into, with the P2, the ability to do threat hunting, but P1 also includes our safe links, where it can inspect our links and rewrite them. And anytime we click on them, it checks them, as well as the safe attachments functionality, where it can do some advanced anti-malware scanning and behavioral scanning on the attachments. So we think that's an important one for credit unions to have too, especially the P2 when we get into the threat hunting. What that allows us to do is if one of our employees gets a bad attachment, we can go in and research where that came from, see who else might have got it, and then remove it entirely from our environment, either put it in quarantine, delete it, whatnot. So it gives us a really advanced functionality for dealing with those threats. And we've had customers call up and say, hey, can you help me get rid of this? But without this tool, we're not able to effectively do that. And then lastly, the mobility and security actually includes that Azure AD up above, but also includes the Intune functionality, is what we're seeing most folks want, where we can control either mobile devices, we can put this on Windows 10 devices, and make sure that we have security settings set, control the conditions under which they can access. So we can make sure it has encryption, we can make sure that antivirus is running, all of these types of security checks that we want to do. We can make sure that that happens before we allow the device to access our data, and then in conjunction with that conditional access, grant them or require additional checks. So some really good products here. And we can go ahead to the next slide, Amy. And then so lastly, we looked at what should credit unions be buying together. These are what OGO recommends as some basic bundles to include those functions and features that we talked about earlier, that both we need to look at from a best practices, regulatory, and just good security point of view, right? So when we look at the business premium, although that comes with the Office 365 Advanced Threat Protection Plan 1, we just believe that we should go to the Plan 2 for that threat hunting ability, because its effect on our environments and to mitigate an attack once it starts through email allows us to do that. So we thought that was a great add-on. When we look at get to the enterprise packages, when we look at E3 does not come with a lot of extra add-ons. It does come with some of the advanced compliance functionality that larger organizations are going to need, but when we looked at it, we thought we needed to add on that mobility and security, which is going to give us that conditional access in the mobile devices, as well as that advanced threat protection that we talked about above. Similarly, with the Office 365 E5, it comes with some of the functionality that's part of the mobility and security, but when we add on the mobility and security E5, and if most folks that are going for the Office E5 without the Microsoft E5 are, large organizations, and now we're getting into identity protection, privileged identity management, and some of the advanced threat analytics, where we can see what's happening across our on-prem organization as well as the Office 365. And so again, adding that on with the threat protection, we thought gave a good security posture within your cloud services there. And then when we jump to Microsoft 365, E3, again, it adds on the mobility and security that we talked about previously, but the big differentiator there is it comes with the Windows 10 Enterprise, but was also missing that advanced threat protection P2, so we thought that was appropriate. And then when we get to the Microsoft 365 E5, that is the Mac Daddy of all the Office 365 licensing, and comes with almost everything bundled, and including voice and some those other pieces, the identity protection, the advanced threat analytics that I mentioned earlier. So you generally don't need to add on with that. You get almost everything that Microsoft offers. But so those are the bundles that when we took a look at and looked at all the feature comparisons and where we needed to land from a security posture, was what we thought was a best practices for credit unions.
All right, so this is actually our final slide of the presentation, and we'll talk about licensing flexibility. What type of commitments will the credit union be required to make, and other options to provide more flexibility? So like I said earlier on, when you go direct to Microsoft, you're usually required to make a 12-month commitment for these type of licensing. And that can be problematic, especially with the, as your staff expands and contracts, being able to get rid of licenses that you no longer need, or adding new licenses that you want, or maybe upgrading your licensing. You don't necessarily want to be pigeonholed into a 12-month commitment. So some of the nice things that you can do is either pay more and go directly to Microsoft and get that flexibility, or if you have a Microsoft Cloud Service Provider, with a Microsoft CSP license, which is how OGO manages our licenses for our clients, you can actually adjust licensing on the fly. So I've been asked that in the past, what's the benefit of registering with a CSP? This is one of the main benefits here, is as you want to change licensing, you can do it. And if you want to go from business premium, maybe your business premium in your organization expands and now you're over 300 employees and you need to move to an enterprise license, right? Very easy to do within the CSP portal. So definitely some things to think about here when you're deciding, do I want to go and do this myself? Do I want to bring in a partner to do this? And I think, some of the other things to think about when you go back to those polls that we put out there earlier is reminding yourself to ask yourself some of those questions. Do I feel comfortable configuring this, or do I want an expert who's done this multiple times to do it? Obviously, there's a lot of CSP providers out there who can help with this. So that's just one thing we wanted to make sure we highlighted as part of our decision-making tree when you go to decide how you want to leverage Microsoft 365. We can go to the next slide, Amy. So at this point, we've got a few minutes left until 4 o'clock. We'd love to answer any questions if anybody has any comments, any feedback or anything you'd like to discuss related to Office 365 licensing.
Yeah, absolutely. Please, guys, go ahead and enter those questions in the box. And just a reminder, if you're looking for a copy of the slides, that's we've got a saved out version of that in the handout section. And we'll also go ahead and about an hour after this ends, we'll send out an email that'll have a copy to a recording of this webinar as well if you want to rewatch. So as we get some questions coming in, thank you. We have one for you guys. What kinds of things are affected by voice if we want to move there that we need to keep in mind?
Yeah, so if you are looking at integrating voice, you definitely want to be looking at the E5 license. The E5, whether it's Microsoft or Office, includes the voice integration. It's probably a much bigger conversation here, depending on what your phone solution is, how you deal with members, and that kind of thing. So we definitely, I think that's probably something we should circle back on for whoever asked that, or if anyone else is interested in that, and have an offline conversation to discuss what your current setup is and whether or not the E5 license and the voice integration is right for your credit union. But that being said, there's also a conference license. So you may not want to integrate your whole voice solution into Office 365, and that's fine, but you may want to be able to schedule meetings through your calendar in Outlook and be able to set up team meetings where people can call into your team meetings. And if that's the case, there is an additional Conference Bridge license, which you can look at adding to any specific user who you want to have that functionality.
Awesome. Thanks, Brandon. And to the folks who are interested in that, on the screen, we've got Brandon's email address. Please feel free to reach out to him, as he said, if you want to discuss that further. We also have a question that came in. Where do we find cost breakouts of the different licenses?
Yeah, so that's a great question. Any of the licenses that you're going to purchase directly from a CSP should be priced identically to the way Microsoft sells them direct to you. So you can go on Microsoft's website and click on licensing, and all of those options are provided. Also, all of the features that come along with those licenses are included there. So the only difference is specific CSPs may layer support costs on top of the licensing, so that may adjust your licensing cost if you work with a CSP. But for the most part, the licensing should be similarly priced to what you find on the website.
Awesome, terrific, Brandon. That is the last question we had that came in. Do we have any more that anyone, feel free to go ahead and type those in if you have any final questions before we wrap up. And of course, as always, if you have any questions that come to you later, please feel free to reach out either to Brandon and Shane, whose email addresses are on the screen, or else, of course, to info@ongoingoperations.com, and we can get you hooked up with the right person to discuss your needs. And I'm not seeing any more questions coming in. So Brandon and Shane, if you want to close us out, any concluding thoughts?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Amy. Thank you for hosting and being a presenter for this. I do want to thank everybody for joining us. We'd love to hear any other questions that you think of later. If you'd like to discuss Office 365 with ongoing operations and talk through, get some more, pick our brains for some of our expertise, or even potentially work with us to perform a migration to Office 365. We'd love to hear from you. Please feel free to email myself or Shane. And thank you. Appreciate you joining us today.
Yep. Thanks, everybody.